Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening to those who are joining us from Europe, UK, and India, and for our friends from North America and Canada. Good morning. My name is Vasudevan Swaminathan. I'm the principal and president at Zuci Systems. We are based out of Chennai, India, and in Chicago. I welcome you all to the first episode of Surai Potru, a new series of quarterly sessions that we are starting at Zuci Systems, where we'll be inviting founder CEOs and talk to them about their entrepreneurial journey. Let me introduce our guests for today. Those of you in the audience who don't know Tamil, please bear with me for a brief moment when I say this. In Tamil, when someone is doing exceptionally well in any arena of life, people say, "Oho nu pandrar." As far as our guest is concerned, I'd love to slightly change it and say ZOHO nu pandrar. So we have Sridhar Vembu, founder and CEO of ZOHO, with us today. Sridhar, namaskaram, and welcome to Surai Potru. I wish we can see you. Unfortunately, the webcam doesn't seem to work for you for whatever reason. But welcome, Sridhar, and thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Our pleasure, Sridhar. Our pleasure. So to those who are in the audience, Sridhar Vembu needs no introduction within the IT community in India and outside of it, actually. However, it would be my honor and privilege to introduce Sridhar to this audience today. Sridhar was born in Umayalpuram, a small town in the Tanjavur district of Tamil Nadu. Sridhar did his BTech from IIT Madras, specializing in electrical engineering, and went on to Princeton, USA, to do his PhD. Sridhar worked in Qualcomm for a couple of years before he bootstrapped AdvanNet in 1996. In 2009, AdvanNet became ZOHO Corporation. ZOHO, as Sridhar recently mentioned in an interview, probably a year back or so, has more than 300,000 customers. And as most of us in this audience know, ZOHO competes with global names like Microsoft, Salesforce, Google, and everybody. So it's a pleasure having Sridhar on our show. What do you want to hear from Sridhar today? I was thinking about it as I was preparing for this meeting. Everything that we want to know about Sridhar is available in either print content or on the visual medium online, actually. In terms of how he bootstrapped, the challenges that AdvanNet faced during the dotcom burst, Sridhar's vision for rural India, the reason Sridhar refuses venture capital, why he is not interested to know ZOHO's valuation, about ZOHO University, the way they are shaping up people, Sridhar's philanthropy activities, and more recently about ZOHO setting up a 250 member bed or a community hospital near Katangulathur, Chennai. So everything is available on the internet. So again, if you're following Sridhar on Twitter, you can know more about his thoughts on rural housing, Carnatic music, Tuklak magazine, his take on doctorates, education, his love for Tamil language, everything actually. So it made me wonder, what should I, request Sridhar to talk to, with this audience? What is that we would like to know from him? As we say, when you engage with people of Sridhar's stature, when you talk to them, there's so much of learning that we can get from him. So I'm not going to deep dive into any of the topics that I just mentioned that is available publicly. But today I want to ask a few questions to Sridhar, where we know more about his bootstrapping journey, skills for entrepreneurs, time management, and his inspirations, and many other interesting topics. Actually, we have a 45-minute session that would end at 10:15. Of course, if there are a few minutes that we can extend and do that, we'll try and see if we can accommodate that, if you can cover all our questions. With that being said, Sridhar, I would like to start off with the first question to you by asking, do you remember the exact moment when the thought to start a company came to you, or when you decided to start a company? When and where did it happen? And did you have a business plan and all that ready when you launched? That would be my first question for our audience.
Yeah, there was probably around 95, 96, when my brother and my brother Kumar, who's a co-founder, and I were we were both engineers in Qualcomm in San Diego. And we would go, when we go shopping weekend or something, we'll go to Walmart or we'll go to something and we'll see that there's pretty much nothing you can buy made in India, right? So, which told us, then we realized, we produce all the talent in India. There's so many of us here in the US, but why aren't we able to produce anything in India? So, and at that point, we knew we want to be in business, doing something. But then he decided to actually go back to India around November of 1995. Then I left my job in April of 96 and went back. There was no business plan, actually. Neither he nor I had a business plan. And our plan was to do something. And we had saved up a little bit of money, and that was going to be our, we are going to figure it out as we go. That was the plan.
Wow.
But also why we never approached the venture capital for anybody, because we don't have a plan. What are they going to fund you on? So that is why we decided not to. It's not like there was any choice in the matter. So at that time.
Okay. Thank you, Sridhar.
But I tried my hand in some hardware. I tried my hand in building some hardware with an engineer, and that failed. And I spent my savings at that point, and then I decided maybe we'll stick to software. So there was along the way there was some lessons learned like that too. So
okay, interesting, Sridhar, because my succeeding following question was on that actually. Because in one of the interviews, you did mention that you spent about 15 lakhs of your money with your on your first product idea, which you had mentioned that did not even take off beyond the drawing board. So I wanted to ask you, what lessons did you learn from that effort? Yeah, and was the SNMP the second product that you tried at that point of time?
Yeah, so that actually it was a little bit longer route than that. When the first product, the first idea, we had failed. Then back to the drawing board. I had to actually also, I became a, in Silicon Valley, you can find a lot of that bug fixing jobs easily. So because people need, typically what happens is you add engineering teams that maybe a startup gets sold, engineers leave, bugs need to be fixed, they'll hire somebody. That's a very common thing to see, actually. But particularly startups that get sold, after 6 months, somebody has to maintain that, right? So there will be such maintenance jobs available. So I took up a job like that for a period to figure out what to do, because that was an easier one to get and easier one to, and they also have, they know that you'll fix a few bugs and then go. So that was the idea. They're not expecting any, because the company already met its objective of exit, right? It's already exited successfully. So at that point, nobody has really motivation to do anything new. They just want to keep the system running. So they'll call somebody like somebody to do that maintenance. And I was doing some of that for a period, actually, just to. Then one of our common friends, Tony Thomas, he actually had that SNMP API that he built, actually. So it wasn't, I didn't build it. He had built it, and and he came and he asked for help. He said, I need help with marketing this. So I said, okay, I'll help you market. So, remember, he's an engineer, I'm an engineer. He's asking for help. I said, I'll market it, not knowing what that meant. So then we go to a trade show, and surprisingly, we found some customers. So that was when it became kind of, okay, once you have customers, some customers are willing to pay for it. So it becomes real. So that is how it happened. We knew we wanted to be in business, but it wasn't a slow, accidental process. Meanwhile, my brother Kumar had found some things in India to keep himself busy. He was building some telecom protocols at that time, and he had some money coming in through that effort. So we were keeping ourselves alive for the first few months or a year, trying to figure out what to do next. So that was the situation as of 96, 97. So.
Okay. Excellent. And naturally, that's another thing that you have spoken about in all your interviews, the first few years of survival. And you always wanted to make sure that Advent survives basically. So how did you handle all the distraction at that point of time, Sridhar? For example, let's say, I'm sure people would have come to you saying that, this is not for you, maybe you should think about doing other things, and, maybe you should go for VC and things like that. How did you keep that motivation going at that point of time?
So I don't interact with, even now, right? It's, you choose your circle wisely. That's what I'll say. Because, peer pressure is one of the reasons why we do a lot of things. So I have always, whether in IIT or in on business world, I generally kept a peer group that is not very, I actually never believe in chasing what is currently cool. I mean, you think about it. In some of the greatest investors, like Warren Buffett was a good example. He never chased what is cool. I mean, he sits in Omaha, Nebraska, right? I mean, Nebraska somewhere, Omaha, I think, right? Now, he's not in Wall Street. How many people think that one of the greatest investors of all time will sit in Omaha, Nebraska, right? How many people actually will realize that he could do that? And the reason why he said that is to insulate himself from the daily pressure of Wall Street, peer pressure, all that. So it's better for him not to be in the loop, actually, so to speak, often. So he'll make more objective decisions. And I am such a person, actually. It's better for me not to be in the loop. So I actually generally, in other words, I don't crave to know the latest, what is, I'm missing out on something, the fear of missing out, right? I never had that. So we'll figure out something. That's what my, and somebody will say, oh, you're going to miss the bus. Well, if you miss the bus, we'll catch the next bus. There'll always be some bus, right? So that's what they say.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. So at that point, again, going back to the first question. So by the time you were into a few years, you were already into business, by a few years. Did you start actually putting together a plan in terms of what you wanted to do and things like that, though you didn't have a business plan when you started?
Actually, I don't know we ever had a business plan. So there was always it was I mean, when you bootstrap, you have a discipline of you have to pay for yourself. Right? Every month the rent has to be paid.
Yes.
The employees have to be paid, the electricity bill has to be paid, the phone bill has to be paid, all of that, right? So you have that constraint.
Yes.
As long as you're meeting that and you are going and your revenue is coming in and you can see some growth, we don't make very long range plans that way because they tend to, we have an approach to product, what we want to build, but we don't have an approach to how that they should do in the market because there's so many other variables that you don't get to control and the market environments change all the time. So we try not to project an illusion of certainty in those. We try to control the variables we control and see how to adapt to the market. That's how I'll put it. I'll give you an example. We built a product, let's say, and the product doesn't have the market we think it has, or we thought it would have. Then we'll have to figure out what do we do with this? And of course, one option is go do something else. But there may be other options. For example, you repurpose it to some other adjacent market, or you repurpose it to in some other customer base you thought of, right? Some other customers in a different way. So that you think of when you identify that, okay, the opportunity we thought was there isn't there, kind of thing, right? So you are that is to me the equivalent of planning, but it's planning with a different twist. Traditionally, planning is thought to be you project a hockey stick or whatever growth smoothly ahead. Everybody knows, people who are doing it know it is fiction. You really don't know that what is your growth going to be 2 years down the road anyway.
Yeah.
But you can say that this is the market we are going after. Maybe that market is not the way we envisioned or not panning out. Then we shift it to some other market or some other kind of product,
Okay.
or something. You can always figure out something.
Yeah. So that brings up also another interesting question, right? Because it was the mid-90s when biggies like Infosys, TCS, Wipro were seeing success with outsourced software services, and you were right there in Silicon Valley watching all this and seeing how these companies are doing. And a lot of entrepreneurs that are probably very well doing today in the services space started during at that point of time, which is around 95, 96. Why did you choose to go the product route when you are right in front of your eyes looking at the outsourced services space and everything? That's something I wanted to ask you.
Yeah, that was to me, even then it was kind of obvious to me that we wanted to build products, because ultimately that if you want to build software, and the margins will be better in product than in services, right? That was obvious even then. But you just look at the revenue per employee of Microsoft versus Infosys. That will tell you how much revenue per person they'll make,
Yes.
right? So it was obvious.
Yes.
But it was obvious even in 95. But more than that, it was also that I temperamentally am not well suited for running a software services operation, because you have to, basically your product vision is not in your hand, right? You have to build a custom product for each customer or different one. And so that's a very, there's a lot of, you don't have a coherent what is your product. So that is another thing. So you have to do what you like to do, right? That's another, not just what business is. You want to have some level of, I'm able to do this business, right? So
yes,
those were the reasons. And finally, it was also, services was getting crowded already. It's not like there were not enough players. There's already a lot of players, even as of mid-90s. In fact, those same players are still there today. Not like very many new players cropped up, right? So
true.
It was already very crowded. So it was not easy for a new entrant to break into. Those were the reasons.
Okay. Thank you, Sridhar. So again, a very extended question to that. So you started off AdventNet was doing fine, and suddenly the dot-com burst happens. In fact, I remember applying to AdventNet for a job when you were in Velachery. I believe you were personally part of interviews at that point of time, 99, 2000 actually. So I remember the time when I came to the the office that was opposite to Velachery bus stand. So, but anyway, getting back to the question, so AdventNet was doing well, and things were going fine, and then the dot-com burst happened, and you say that you did mention in many interviews that only 3 of your customers survived out of the 150 you had. Again, a low point. How did you? How was your mind, working then? What was going on in your mind at that point of time? What were you thinking about restructuring and all that?
Yeah, it was obvious that at that time, 2001, after the September 11 attacks, and then the 2002, it was obvious that the whole thing had gone and it was not going to come back. Okay, it was the whole networking industry was going through a major shift, consolidation, all that. I mean, you had hundreds of optical networking startups and wireless startups, all of those. It was clear that they were going away, and that's one of the things that people, don't learn these lessons from history. Today, you see similarly a huge number of SaaS players. And it's not clear to me that everyone can survive that way, right? It's the same forces. We have over capacity, they get consolidated. So, and that's what happened then. And so it was initially, it's kind of depressing to realize that a lot of things you have worked on don't appear to matter, because the market itself was going away. It's not our fault. It's fault, really. The market is going away. What do we do? So you have to, there was a period like, I would describe it like a funeral atmosphere. There's not, when you go into office was a pain. Right? Go to office and You're staring at the ceiling. We don't know what to do. But slowly you recover from it and you say, okay, we'll figure out something else. And I decided we have to do something else. We can't be doing this anymore. And it took a little bit of time to convince others that we have to be doing something else. See, one of the things about a lot of good engineering teams is that when you are on a path, you want to continue on it. To go tell somebody, scrap this code, we'll write some new code for a new business, is actually hard to do. They are attached to that, right? But I have to persuade people that, because I have to say, look, there's no market here. The market has vanished on us. It did vanish. Subsequent the experience showed that there never were that many optical networking players or any of that in the industry ever again. So it vanished. So we had to do something, and I had to restructure our teams to re-engineer the whole thing, build up new direction. That's what happened over 2003, 4 timeframe.
Okay, and that again brings up another interesting point, because you had the foresight to see that this is going away. I need to think of something differently. So when it comes to decision making, Sridhar, do you rely on data or your gut, or what we call as intuition? And how important is intuition for entrepreneurs?
You need a mix of both, obviously. The data to make sure that you're not completely in your own imaginary world, but you have to have something prior to data, because what data are you going to look at? That's a question, right? And then what forecast would you do on the data that you will believe? I mean, for example, I'll tell you today's context. Do any of us know what is the post-pandemic shape of the economy, global economy, or US economy, or Europe economy will be like? What will it be like 6 months or 1 year from now? Can any of us predict it? There'll be a lot of opinions. Each one, I can have an opinion, you can have an opinion, everybody will have something. But there isn't any real great way to predict it. I mean, look at the stock market, it's all-time highs, right? But does it mean that there's no disruption and it's going to go? So we cannot predict. Which means you have to go by something deeper than only data. You have to actually have something deeper. And for example, in my case, I have actually believed for a while that the entire global trading system, economic system we are on, is on an unsustainable course. So we have to change course. And that has been my thesis for a while. Okay. So we try to act according to the thesis. That's where a lot of the rural initiatives to all of that comes in, because it's once you are on a thesis, then you will act on it. And does current data, everything back it up? Because if you believe the stock market, the world is all in great shape. Okay. But is it in great shape? Do we believe that it's in great shape? That's a question, right?
No. Okay. So it's a mix of both that you need. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll ask you another question based on again one of your interviews. I watched the Sastra University convocation that you did in 2017, where you were giving away the academic degrees and everything. One of the most important points that you touched based you spoke about time management and quality of thinking. You told about why you should look at quality of thoughts and things like that. But my question is on time management. Over the past 24 years, Sridhar, you have seen a lot in terms of having an office almost empty to having 5,000, 7,000 people working and all that. How do you plan your day? How does a typical day look for you? How do you prioritize and work as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I try not to. My main thing is not to over-structure myself. A lot of the, in my opinion at least, to me, a difficult life would be one that's highly structured, rigid life, where every day you have every hour is booked for some activity or other. You have no unstructured time to think about it, and that's The reason is that structure is like a syllabus in school. Okay.
Right.
And I like to say all the interesting questions in life or business are out of syllabus. And that's actually what happens, right? A lot of,
Right.
I mean, literally compared to the business we were in, ZOHO is out of syllabus. You have to realize nobody is asking us to build this product. Nobody is asking us to do these things. That's literally out of syllabus from what we were doing, right? So how do you do it? Why do you do it?
Right.
There is not an internal or external constituency to build many of the things we built.
Right.
And that became big businesses later. So that comes from the thinking a little bit out of syllabus. I mean, they'll say out of the box, but I say out of syllabus because really it's outside of your structured way of thinking about the world. Only too much structure. You clearly need some structure, but I'm saying that we don't want to burden ourselves with too much structure. You got to have balance.
Got it.
So which means that my day, I actually have a few hours of calls with the various teams and internal, but typically they won't be very scheduled meetings. Many of them will be ad hoc.
Okay.
As needed happens. Somebody will ping me in chat and say, we need to talk about this. Then we'll have a call. We'll have a video call or chat or whatever.
Okay.
So those kinds of activities will go on quite a bit, and then I keep myself about a few hours block of time to read or think or a little more unstructured roaming around. I also write some code to amuse myself and keep myself current. So all those. So I keep try to keep enough time that way. So
okay. Yeah, I did see that you mentioned about writing code even today, and I was wondering with so many applications, how do you even get to it and do that? Okay. So if based on your experience, Sridhar, for the past 24 years of entrepreneurship, if you had to give some takeaways, let's say 3 to 4 key takeaways for entrepreneurs, budding entrepreneurs, what would you say, Sridhar?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I would say is if you have to ask yourself, why are you getting into business? And because it's cool, because it's what everybody is doing, and otherwise I have a fear of missing out on the action. So be careful, because those are often the bad reasons to get into something. Because if you're entering something because it's already very hot, it's probably already too hot and it's already very crowded. It's very difficult for a new entrant to make a mark often, right?
Right.
So here, on the other hand, you believe you have a very unique idea that is better than anybody else. Obviously, you should do yourself a favor and enter. But a lot of times, if you are going to do this because it's hot and I have a fear of missing out, then there is one thing I would like to caution against. Second is, very often, I mean, in these things, if you're a fledgling new business, both from a customer and you are a fledgling new entrepreneur, think about both, meaning you don't have experience, you don't have anything to proved already to people, then you have to assume that it's going to be difficult to convince any big customer to take a big bet on you. Sometimes you may be able to, you may be a very good salesperson to do that, but often not. Not many people are actually not such good salespeople. So then going and saying, trust me on something and write a big check, it can succeed for a very few people who have that skill set to convince like that. For most people, it may not work. So then you have to think about how do you ladder this? How do you reduce the problem to something smaller where a customer will trust you for something smaller? That would be one. So think, in other words, sequence your big ideas into sequence of smaller ideas. That's what I'd say. Trying to figure out smaller ideas that lead to a big idea rather than one big idea all in one step. That would be often useful.
Okay.
So, and then finally, your people. You have to assume that when you're a nobody, you're not going to be able to attract the coolest people or the hottest people, whichever way you want to think, right? So
Right.
you don't assume that you're not going to be able to attract. So you have to then figure out how to get some talent, which often comes down to, how much are you willing to do to them, rather than how much do you expect them to do for you, right? And maybe you can't afford money, but are you going to give them training? Are you going to give them a challenge that is interesting to them? All of that. So that is how I would think about this.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. How has the startup world changed from 96 to today? As you rightly said, a lot of us are getting into business for various reasons. As you said, some of us might think that it is very cool, it's the thing to do and all that, while some of us might have a valid idea and things like that. And you shared your thoughts on that. But how has the startup world itself changed? Where do you see this going?
Yeah, definitely in India, startup have become way cooler. Okay. So compared to, say, 15, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, startups are much cooler.
Right.
And from the government, everybody exploits the issues of. So that's one important thing to, that's a difference, key difference now. Second is, of course, a lot more venture capital is available today. And at that time, even in the Silicon Valley, it was difficult. Even in Silicon Valley, venture capital was much less available. India, it was non-existent. Today, you have essentially everywhere there's a lot of capital flowing around. So that is another thing that is different. But I want to also caution entrepreneurs, that doesn't make it easier to, it may make it easier to start, but it doesn't necessarily make it easier to succeed. Because if it's easy to start for you, it's easy to start for everyone. If you can use AWS to scale, everybody can use AWS to scale. So scaling itself is not your secret magic ingredient, differentiator anymore, right? So you have to think along those lines.
Yeah.
So just because some things have become easy, doesn't mean that easy thing will give you a competitive advantage necessarily. So.
Right. Okay. Okay. I want to ask one of the questions based on what you said earlier. You spoke about planning your day, reading books and all that. Time and again, you have cited George Orwell, Bertrand Russell, and particularly Ayn Rand as an important reason for you to start a business. Do you get time to read books these days? What are you reading now? And recommend some books for us.
Yeah. So this is these days I've been reading, there's a book called How Asia Works by Joe Studwell, on how the Eastern Asian economies developed. Then I just recently got a book called Trade Wars or Class Wars, that explains why there is all these trade wars going on, US and China and all of that. It's very clear there is something deep forces around here. And so that is another book, because I try to understand what is happening with the global economy now, where it's heading. So those are the books I'm reading, and I read also books on architecture. For example, there's maybe a controversial opinion, but not very. Most of the architecture of the 20th century is sucky. All these cubic boxes, box and box and box, and with a rectangular box or cubicle box or whatever, but no real aesthetic to it, right? And because the idea of building a beautiful building itself seems to have gone away, that you build functional, ugly boxes, basically. Why did that happen? So I've been reading a book called The Architectural Dystopia. Why did that happen? So that goes into it. So those are some of the things I've been reading.
Okay, and just to extend that, is that like you look forward to a model like a Larry Packer model kind of architecture is what would work best, is what you are ideally trying to say?
Actually, we had, look, if you go anywhere, you look at the older buildings, the older village.
Right.
In other words, you go to a village, you can pretty much tell which buildings were built recently, because they are the ones that look ugly. Okay.
Yes.
And it's not just a matter of taste. You know objectively that this is an ugly one. It won't last. You know that it won't last. Nobody will miss it when it's gone. See, the beauty of a building is when it's gone, you miss it, right? And a lot of these ugly buildings, nobody will miss them when they are gone. They are gone. So why did we do that? Why did we end up with that? And that is an interesting question, right? It turns out there was 100 years ago, 105 years ago in Germany, there was a movement to destroy actively all notion of aesthetic in architecture because that is considered a unnecessary luxury of capitalism or some such thing. That is, beauty itself is something that should not end. So you got to be very, and this is not minimalism. Actually, it's worse than that. It is brutalism. They called it brutalism. Brutalism is one of the things where you have this absolutely unadorned concrete monsters. And the Soviet Union picked it up. Then the same kind of trend arrived in the US and everywhere. We are actually living in that world, living in those buildings, by the way. A lot of us, unfortunately. So, and that, I mean, you can see that it's a century-long trend. Now it's reversing. A lot of people like me are now reacting to this and say, I don't want to build anything ugly. In fact, one of the things when I hire an architect, tell them is pretty much all of 20th century is off limits. If you are bringing me a 20th century design, let's not have the conversation because mostly it sucks. Mostly it sucks. So that is what I say.
Okay. Apart from ZOHO blog, ZOHO website, what other top blogs, websites do you refer to? Something that you cannot live without, looking at every day, where you gain a lot of inspiration from, or any people, not people, but particularly content that you look up to every day apart from ZOHO.
Yeah, I look at Hacker News a bit, and I spend some time going through some of the threads.
Okay.
And I actually have browse some of the newspaper sites, everything from Hindu or NDTV, all that, just to scan some news, and New York Times, maybe Bloomberg, all that. I just go through what is going on. So just a summary. I don't read a lot of it because I don't have time, but I just at least summary what's going on. But that's about it. I don't watch TV at all. I don't even have a TV set. So that's it. Yeah.
Nice. And who have been your biggest inspirations, Sridhar, from since you were young? I do remember that you had mentioned about Qualcomm co-founder and one of teachers from your school and all that, actually. But I generally wanted to understand who have been your inspirations.
Yeah, in the business world, once we got into this, I actually I used the Singapore founder Lee Kuan Yew as a big role model because he created from a third world country, racially, religiously, linguistically, ethnically, all manner of divisions. Every possible way, it was a divided society. Right? And he forged the first world nation model. From a third world poverty, he raised it to first world within about 30-40 years.
40 years, yes.
It's useful to understand how Lee did it. I mean, these are extraordinary episodes in history. And in my opinion, it doesn't get enough study. They should be studied and not like writing an exam study. Just actually read his books, read the stuff. I bought all his collected works once when I was going through Singapore, and I went to the bookstore and bought all of Prime Minister Lee's collected works, and I read them. I read them all, probably 94 or 95. Okay, so it made a lasting impression on me that how Prime Minister Lee thought about the problem, how he developed Singapore, right, from zero. Then another inspiration is I look at the Honda Motor Company, Honda Motor in Japan. Mr. Honda was Honda Soichiro was from a humble origin, rural. He was a mechanic to becoming a leading car maker in the world. How that process that happened. So I've read about that and I take some inspiration from it now. And you have to go through step by step. Honda began in the 1950s, but until the late 70s, they were not a major player in the US at all. In fact, until maybe 80. So it took 25 years.
Yes.
And we don't think in those 25 years now. We think some magic should happen within 3 or 5 years. And it's, in my opinion, that's very hard to do.
True. Thanks, Sridhar. I think we are almost, we have about, we are almost towards the end of this. Sridhar, thank you so much again for joining us and for sharing a lot of valuable thoughts. See, every time I have friends who have worked from Advent period, so I keep hearing about you since 98, 99. So every time I hear about you from my friends who have worked in Advent and ZOHO from the past, or any article that gets shared with me on LinkedIn or any other social media, Sridhar, I always get reminded of the famous lines of Avayar from the Tamil Nidhi Nool called Muthurai. I'm sure you know it. Once again, if the audience, if you are not aware of Tamil, my apologies for that. But those 4 lines is what I feel personifies you actually. நெல்லுக்கு இறைத்த நீர் வாய்க்கால் வழியோடி புல்லுக்கும் ஆங்கே பொசியுமாம் தொல்லுலகில் நல்லார் ஒருவர் உளரில் அவர் பொருட்டு எல்லாருக்கும் பெய்யும் மழை. So which basically means even if there is a single good soul out there, that itself becomes the reason for rains to benefit everyone. So that's what I always think about you when somebody brings up your name.
Too much.
Once again, thank you so much, Sridhar.
Yeah,
from the heart,
on the thing.
Sure, Sridhar.
Because I see the questions on the thing, and so there was a question about the Japanese.
Oh, yeah. Yes, Sridhar. I was watching.
Yeah.
Yes, Sridhar. First question is.
Japanese. Maybe I'll say that's in the bottom of that list. I assume it's the top this thing. Okay. So I'll try to.
Yes.
So what I would say is, the Japanese professor said, challenged us why we are not making the mechanical pencil in India. The engineering drafting principles we use. He said it's made in Germany. Indian engineers should be able to make it, right? That really made an impression. See, the Japanese think in any product. In fact, to this day, I follow this. When I see some new product, I ask, how is this made? Who makes them? What kind of machines would you use? What kind of technology is in it? Not that I'm going to make them, but at least I want to get, that's my hobby. For example, I watched a video how the nail cutters are made, nail clippers are made. How do you make them? So
right.
I would like to encourage that kind of habit. Okay. So
yes, yeah, and you said that if I remember correctly, the Japanese actually made it, right? Though they were a little disappointed initially that it was done by Germany. They said we will make it in Japan in a couple of years or few years from now, right? That's what I read about it when I saw the story, right?
Yeah. So that is that we have a lot to learn from Japan, actually, particularly India. And I don't think we pay enough attention to Japan. That's we pay a lot of attention to US, all that, but Japan is a good model because it's an overcrowded, populated country, right, in a way. And now, of course, they have a population problem, but that's because they are highly dense. It's exceptionally dense, as dense as India, not more. So it's worth paying attention to their experience.
Sure.
So yeah.
Any other questions that you want to pick up, please go ahead, Sridhar. I'm also looking if there are anything that you find interesting.
Somebody wanted us to do a meeting. Yeah, I would have liked to, but maybe from next meeting we'll do this. And
yeah, I'm sorry about that. Again, to the audience, we could have had a webcam with Sridhar. Unfortunately, I don't know what went wrong. Sorry about that.
I have the webcam didn't work here on this, so some weird reason on the go to webinar. I tried very hard, but couldn't get it to work. So, and
we will do another session with you, Sridhar, a little later.
Yeah, thank you also. Yeah.
Thank you, Sridhar. Thank you so much, Sridhar. Thank you for your time. Take care. Wishing you and ZOHO the very best. Take care.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the audience. Thank you to the audience. Bye.
Thanks to the audience. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye.